I just had this thought about saying about how we've abandoned Halloween. Look at what's happening in culture around like the image of the cross, the image of like monastics, like especially nuns, not monks for some reason, but nuns, how they're turned into something evil, how they're turned into something dark in horror films.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the cross itself is this symbol of, when I see a cross, I think of this light. You know, there's some light kind of coming in through the trees here.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm a Christian now. But like our culture, these are disembodied symbols. They kind of lost their telos, their purpose
Yeah.
for most people in secular Britain. And in a way, the darkness, evil, the devil, it just fills that void with death, basically.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I know of some nuns. They're wonderful people. Like, it's just so strange to see that thing is connected with like blood and darkness and death. It's such an inversion of something that's good.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I think if once the culture's kind of had out of our collective mind, we've almost lost the idea of what the cross means, and like I said, what nuns and that sort of thing mean. And even like a graveyard is like a place of rest next to a church. It's kind of like
rest
a whole,
in peace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the idea of even rest in peace, the word is used like as like a ooh, like, all right,
rest in
yeah.
peace. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's all this,
It's
ooh,
so ridiculous.
peace, hallowed evening, ooh, sacred evening. Let's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
dress up with like monster
But
horns.
those things can't be scary unless the meaning is gone.
Yeah.
Like if you show me a cross even in a horror film, it's like, oh, well, at least they're glorifying Jesus and the fact that we're all saved from eternal damnation is being represented in this horror film.
Yeah.
But it's not used like that. It's used like a fear device.
Yeah.
Almost like you've got like, yeah, it's almost like it's gone back to its original purpose. Like, look, a torture device, and everyone's like, oh.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yeah.
like it's.
You know, that's a really good intuition, because it is like a torture device, because in the modern frame, the modern secular, I'm not saying everyone that's secular is like this, but the kind of right on secularism, the right on kind of atheism, religious is seen as an oppressive thing.
Yeah.
And so the darkness, you know, I believe this whole like darkness that exists, these dark principalities, using this in the horror movies and everything to say, yeah, and nuns as well. That's the thing about nuns, isn't it? It's like oppressed femininity.
Yeah, so
it's like controlled, the woman who controls herself. Of course, they would say controlled by an institution that's, you know, done all these bad things, forgetting all the immensely good things, the way that Christianity has remade the world. So it's funny because it is shown as like, ooh, religion is a scary thing again.
yeah, it's almost like taking on the meaning of the like loss of meaning in a weird way, or like this pre-Christian. So on nuns, I'm going to use it a bit to transition a little bit, but I was thinking about the symbolism for this talk of witches, and because I think that's when you think of Halloween, that's one of the images that is definitely associated with Halloween. And so I thought I'll go into maybe explain a bit why, see if I can find anything out that I didn't know. So I've looked into it a little bit, and I did think at one point that nuns and witches are definitely, there's definitely a parallel between them, but one of them serving upwards in like a sacrificial way, like sacrificing, having certain things from life, like husbands and families and that sort of thing, in order to serve the most high thing, God.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
And
witches,
to pray for others as well.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
what
and
monastics do. They pray for like a whole community.
And sometimes we have a lot of them the idea of using the word mother towards nuns sometimes, and they call each other sisters. There's this like, they sacrifice something, but they kind of play a role in many ways, in a way that like it's almost like they become mothers for us all in a sense. And then the witch is almost this opposite thing where she sacrifices. You never really hear of like the classical witch having a husband, so they kind of make the same kind of sacrifice, but instead of it being to serve something, it's more to manipulate and to gain power or to grow in power.
Serve themselves.
Yeah, and ultimately to serve Satan, I think, is like the idea. There's this connection that the service goes downwards rather than upwards. And so so I've thought about the fact that there's that connection. Witches in our culture, the idea of them, I think, has over the last few years has become way more favourable towards witches. Like we don't actually. The scary thing is we don't find them that scary anymore, which I think is fascinating, because when you look at what constitutes a witch. So I've been thinking of like some common, even just like from the collective imagination. Not looking too deeply what things are associated with witches. Children are afraid of witches. Like the witches typically would consume or be a danger to children. So there's this idea. There's also the idea of black cats, the broomstick and the cauldron, like the flying broom and the cauldron, and then the pointy hats. So I've been looking at like these kind of elements of it, and I found it really interesting when I was doing a bit of research about it. So obviously there are dangers to children. There's this like non-maternal element to witches, where they're not like warm and nurturing like a mother, but they're more like cold and, I don't know, usually represented like thin and spiky.
Bitter,
kind of.
yeah.
But yeah, just like the opposite of this like warm, loving. If anything, they prey on children. They don't nurture children. So it's like this opposite of the feminine, like the deep feminine sort of impulses that. Yeah. It's like this opposite image. The black cat. So this was quite funny because obviously at the moment there's a bit of a meme at the minute of this like the cat lady, the crazy cat lady, and I think the witch is like the original crazy cat lady. She's got this black. It's usually a black cat, and black cats are associated with bad luck. Like folklore of black cats is like this unlucky thing. I was thinking maybe there's something to the idea that the witch kind of befriends bad luck or becomes keeps bad luck as a pet almost. Like there's this like connection of the witch and bad luck kind of being coming as a pair. Yeah. And then there's the idea of the broom and the cauldron, which I didn't know this. As soon as I started thinking about this, all of a sudden I've read something and I was like, oh, of course that's what it is. But these are domestic items. So the broom and the cauldron is the cooking and cleaning of the wife, of the housewife. Like for thousands of years, those would have been the things that most women would have spent a lot of time using, a broom and a lot of time around a cooking pot, which is what a cauldron is basically. But the witch uses these things in kind of like a subversive way. So she actually uses the broom to gain a form of power, and she like almost like transcends its purpose. Yeah. So she takes the purpose of it and uses it for something else. Yeah. Same with the cauldron. Yeah. That you should make food in there in order to feed the family people. And to serve people food and to feed and nourish. And instead she uses it to make potions to twist reality to her will. Yeah. And it's the same with the broom, that's to clean a space and to kind of keep a home essentially. It's to make things tidy and clean and orderly. And she uses it as a form of transportation, which I don't quite get. Well,
it's kind of flying around like a kind of chaotic thing, isn't it? Yeah. She's always cackling and flying around. Yeah. And okay, she can control it, but it's like a chaotic thing. It's chaos to us. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's
just popped into my head. I think it's really interesting to put the nun and the witch, to see them as two kind of opposites, and the way that the nun is kind of degraded and criticized, and the way that the witch is kind of presented as something good, and we see it in like kind of fantasy shows and things at the moment. Obviously Harry Potter, but I think Harry Potter's a kind of unusual one because Rowling uses like other mythological stories and tropes in a kind of ordered way. Yeah. I think perhaps she just didn't fully, I mean, she's a brilliant writer, but I think perhaps she didn't fully grasp them. But I just want to say really quickly, while we're talking about these kind of patterns and the way that these kind of characteristics are presented with a witch and things, I can hear a voice that says, you know, witches are about women who've been oppressed. Like, I think I want to make the point that when we talk about these things, in its defense, we're not talking about like necessarily history or like, I don't know, the witch hunts where, you know, often innocent people were killed for being witches where they weren't. We're talking again about the way that these tropes present themselves. And some people might say, well, I want to use that trope as a form of liberation. Like, I want to use the broomstick to show I'm not going to clean the house and I'm liberated. But you can't get away from then a desire. You can't get away from the element of that character, the element of that trope, that character that turns away from children. Yes. You can't get away from that. Again, these patterns and the symbols of them are beyond our actual understanding. They're talking about the way the world actually works. Yeah. And it sounds quite arbitrary to say that, but if you celebrate, I don't know, holding up the broomstick and shaking it around and pretending to fly on it, as ridiculous as it sounds, metaphorically speaking, right? Liberated from keeping order within a home, which is a good thing. If you celebrate that, you'll probably end up turning against children.
Yeah, no, it fits perfectly. And let me give you the kicker. So this is the bit I figured out literally on the way to you. So the kicker of it all is the pointy hat. So have you got any idea where that comes from?
No, all I know about pointy hats is a lot of the witch hunt stuff happened like 1600s, and people used to wear pointy hats, so that's all I know. So
sort of 14th, 15th, 16th century.
So just say that again. Someone screamed.
Yeah, it did. So the 14th, 15th, and 16th, the 14th and 15th and 16th century, there would be
Some weird
Every
voices again, howling out. Okay.
This is hilarious. So there's these hats that come from 14th and 15th century Europe that are called hinens or hennins.
Okay.
So it's basically a tall pointy hat, and it would be worn by intelligent women basically and also nobles and sort of the aristocratic women. So they would wear these hats, and you'll sometimes see them with like a veil attached to it, like from the end of it. So you might see they're very medieval looking.
I've seen these in paintings, yeah.
Yeah, so that image is what they used for the witch, and I thought what an amazing image of, like, it's almost the Luciferian intellect that's almost just got too, it's almost gotten too powerful. Like the ideas of the liberated woman obviously come a lot from academic circles. That's kind of where a lot of these ideas come from, and I think that there's obviously a lot of merit in it, and there's a conversation to be had about that, and you can see why women have sort of strove to get out of that. But when I went to the pagan sort of group, when I was sort of involved in that, there was a lot of women there who happily accepted the term witch. They would happily describe themselves as a witch.
Yeah.
And it was really part of their identity. So they wouldn't be insulted that if someone was to say this person says that they're a witch, or they literally claim to be a witch. So yeah. I'm not accusing anybody, but they were all very intelligent women. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something about that, and about the fact that it almost shows that the witch is, in the image of the witch, she's smart.
Yeah.
Like she's very clever.
And cunning.
She's cunning, that's the right word for it. Yeah, she's cunning. And I think all those elements come together to just create this like perfect, like I said, it's like the anti-nun almost, but they create like this perfect character that has terrified children for generations. But there's definitely something to all those elements that there's like the throwing off of the household. There's also the fact they live in the woods, which is quite unusual, but I think that's kind of to do with the fringe. Yeah, I'm going to hear one right now, but it's kind of to do with the fringe and like being unseen and out in, and also associated with nature as well, which probably ties into that as well, and animals.
Yeah.
But it's just an amazing like image, and I think it's very interesting that the culture's attitude towards witches is like changed.
And it's almost like it's something, even now as we're talking about it, I feel like it's hard to talk about because, okay, probably not to the people who are watching this video, but to the general, let's say to the general public, or let's say even to a kind of more liberal Christianity, it's really hard to talk about because people take the oppression of women. Obviously, it's a very kind of, it's an important issue. It's very impassioned. It's hard to just remove, like, get out, take the emotions out of it, and just talk about it. But we could talk about like tropes, examples of like misplaced masculinity or misdirected masculinity or toxic masculinity. We could talk about all that. We could talk about like the male like monster, like uncontrolled man. Like we could talk about Beauty and the Beast. We could talk about all these male examples. But I feel like we're right on it when we're talking about like a nun and a witch.
It just blew my mind thinking about it. I was like, it fits perfect with the culture as it is. As you say, it's difficult to talk about, especially publicly and online, and obviously in a very because it's a sensitive topic. The witch almost is the negative feminine image in our society, and what's happening is it's becoming more favorable. Like it's been looked at as almost maybe something aspirational. And because of that, I think when the old fairy tales, when you start to look at the villains in the old fairy tales, has been like, I quite like that person. There's probably something's probably gone wrong with where you are right now. It's probably not that the old folk wisdom has gone out of whack.